Hi everyone, and you are tuned in to another wonderful episode of Paranormal Minds. I'm your host Shannon Ray, and I'd like to thank you for joining me this evening. Tonight we have a super special guest, Keith Johnson. Before I bring Keith in, I do want to tell you a little bit about him. Keith Johnson is a paranormal investigator, and he is regularly called upon to assist individuals with dealing with alleged paranormal phenomenon and potential inhuman infestation in their homes. Keith's interest in the paranormal started when he was a teenager, having had activity in his own home. Keith has been featured as a consulting demonologist on Sci-Fi Channel's Ghost Hunters, as well as the A&E series Paranormal State. And without further ado, I would like to go ahead and bring in Mr. Keith Johnson and welcome him to the show. Hi, Mr. Johnson.
Hello, Shannon. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderfully, and I'm super glad you're here with me tonight.
Well, super glad to be here. That's for sure.
All right, so I want to start talking a little bit about you, just you as the person, I guess. When you said that you kind of got interested in the paranormal when you were a teenager, can you kind of look back and recall what began that journey?
I actually had some experiences in my own house growing up. Of course, my brother Carl and I are identical twins, and when we were actually small children, we began to experience things. The first thing I remember was when I was 5 years of age, and my mother was drinking a glass of water after supper, and suddenly the water just vaporized. It just bubbled up and was gone, so she didn't get to drink it. And we had no explanation for that, so we termed that our thirsty ghost. And that's how it began. It's just little bizarre things that were not terribly frightening, but enough to let us know that there was something there. And of course I was pretty scared when I heard voices and footsteps outside the window, and then they started happening again when I was about 15 years of age, and then I knew I wasn't imagining it, I wasn't dreaming it. And of course my brother and my sister began playing with a Ouija board to try to contact the spirit, and that seemed to open up things to let it in even further, so it wasn't quite as nice and playful as it had been. And just experiencing some bizarre things, like there was what appeared to be a woman's glove, maybe a driving glove, very old-fashioned, appeared in the hallway. We had no idea where it came from. Looked around, it was gone, kind of like teleportation. And my sister was in the dining room. Suddenly she got shoved from behind by an unseen hand, and the Ouija board started spelling out very threatening things. It wasn't as nice anymore, and things like that. So we realized that something was really there, and I'd always had an interest in anything bizarre or spooky and everything, but of course we were brought up in a Christian household, and I really began concentrating on this, that I wanted to be able to help people, to do some good with it, because I understood that some people were terrorized by this and some people were very frightened, and I had no idea what outlet to use. So I did pray about it, and lo and behold, I was invited to a lecture. My brother and I attended a lecture at Rhode Island College where famed paranormal researchers Ed and Lorraine Warren were speaking, and we found that fascinating and thought maybe we're not so crazy after all. These people go all over the world, and they investigate things that go bump in the night, and the more sinister things like demonology. And I became fascinated with angelology and demonology, began studying it, and of course that lecture really spurred things off. And we met Ed and Lorraine Warren after the lecture, became lifelong friends with them. It was after this lecture that there were also members of a group at Rhode Island College called PIRO, Parapsychological Investigation and Research Organization. And since Carl and I were into the paranormal, we've been studying it, they decided to invite us to a couple of their meetings to talk and share our experiences. And lo and behold, we were soon invited to join their organization. And that's the first formal organization that my brother and I joined, and we were 17 years old at the time, and I guess that's how it started, basically.
With you and your identical twin brother, would it be correct to say that your journey with the paranormal has been paired together?
A lot of it has. A lot of it has. At least we started off together. He he took somewhat of a different route. He experimented more in the darker aspects of it, whereas I did a lot of things I shouldn't have way back when, as far as experimentation goes. But he was kind of more hot and heavy into the experimentation of the paranormal. When you're younger, you don't really realize the dangers and inherent dangers involved, and you dare to do anything. But as the years went by, we devoted ourselves more and more to research and to helping people. We joined an organization called Monitor East years later, which was basically a UFO group. They studied UFOs, but of course when Carl and I joined, we kind of changed that. They branched off into all aspects of the paranormal, and so basically, we've done a lot of things together and done a lot of studying and research together. And you have to remember, though, this goes back to the early 70s. This is before it was popular. This is before it was gaining a lot of national media attention like it is today. So we were kind of outcast in this field. It wasn't something you could sit around at dinner and just talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And even now, when I was in high school, and I was so interested, and I shadowed different paranormal groups, it wasn't something cool then that you talked about with your friends. It was something I kind of hid in the closet, and then it wasn't something I discussed that I did because it was so taboo to do. And even here in the South where I'm at, it still is rather taboo to do, because in a lot of church communities, they believe that anytime you do any kind of work, like spiritually working with spirits and things of that nature, that you're conjuring the devil, no matter what you say.
Mm-hmm.
So, I completely understand that. But what made you choose the area of demonology? Because a lot of people don't just wake up one morning and go, hey, I want to go work in demonology.
Right. Well, Carl and I were always fascinated by not just spirits, but the inhuman realm as well, which includes angels and demons and elementals and what have you. And there were people that were very, very frightened of this and very oppressed. And I personally felt, of course, I was a believer in the Bible, and I believed that these things did exist, and that part of our mission is to deal with these things and make people aware that there is this aspect, that there is this realm. Whereas I personally believe that you don't have to go looking for it, but if it's meant to be, you will be led to it. And that's exactly what happened. Very, very soon on into our career, we were led to situations where people were having problems with the, I guess you could call it the demonic aspect, or the more extreme, unsettling aspects of haunted phenomena.
Now, before we dive into demonology, which I'm very interested in doing, can you kind of take a moment just to discuss what your credentials are as a demonologist and as a parapsychologist?
Okay. Well, I'd like to lay down the line that I've been studying paranormal phenomena and researching for many, many years, and that does not mean I have a degree in it. I don't claim that I'm an expert. I have quite a bit of knowledge, but then again, the more knowledge you have, the more you find out you don't know. You're always learning, and it's not something that I have a certificate on the wall saying you are a certified demonologist by the Vatican.
Yeah.
You have been blessed, and it's nothing like that. It's nothing that I can say it's official and I have the authority over others to do this. So I do not claim that. I have quite a bit of knowledge from doing this. I've been doing it for quite a few years, but that doesn't mean I'm certified in that aspect. You will find it's very difficult to find somebody who is actually certified in demonology. It's more like somebody's a specialist in that. Although I'm sure some people would say I'm certifiable, but it is very, very difficult to find somebody who's actually a certified demonologist. It's more like practical experience. It's what knowledge you gain as you go along. And of course, I have contemporaries who come from a similar background, and we've done quite a bit of studying and trying to help people all we can over the years. And I believe if you're guided by God, by a higher power, you're on the right path.
Yeah, and I would agree with that 110%. All right, so demonology. How would you personally define a demon? Is this definition based on a religious aspect?
Basically, when you hear the connotation demon, it is a religious aspect. The demon is the proverbial fallen angel, the opposite of an angelic presence. It's an angel which has fallen from grace and has the powers of the angelic, but is not on God's side, actually wars against mankind and God. It's in a war with humanity and against God. Now, the term demon, of course, that's an ancient connotation that actually goes back to ancient Greece, and originally the root word meant something that was a wise spirit. It did not necessarily mean an evil or hostile spirit. It meant a wise spirit, sometimes even a guardian spirit. But as, of course, the years went by, it's come to be known, mostly through Catholicism, it's come to be known as the evil spirit, the fallen angel. So that's why fallen angels are referred to as demons today.
Mm-hmm. Now, can you take a moment because in my personal humble opinion, which, is not a whole lot, but the word demon and demonic and evil is thrown around so much that I feel like I could choke on it and vomit. In so many words.
That conjures up quite a picture, too.
Well, but seriously, though, it's all the time. I feel like I'm being force-fed this term, and I know that it's just, it's something to provoke ratings, it's something to provoke fear, and it's not even valid or accurate. So can you take a moment to explain some signs of a demonic occurrence, and when do you actually call for help?
Well, you see that's a good point. When you see the demon or the demonic in media, it's really out there and it's really in your face, where most of the time an actual case like this will be much more clandestine, it'll be much more hidden, and you actually have to kind of dig up the signs for it. You have to do your research. For example, usually in a demonic case, of course, you see the haunting aspects. People are being haunted. They have a spirit in the house. When it's a demonic spirit, which of course this is rare for a full demonic assault, very, very rare, you'll find an individual is targeted. Usually, of course, if it's a family, a whole family will be affected. But usually, one individual in particular will be picked on. It will work on that person, kind of like a brainwashing technique. It will terrorize that person. It will infest a house, and it will infest the family. This is the infestation stage. Then it will escalate into the oppression stage. If it gains enough of a hold, it doesn't always go that far, but if it gains a hold, it will go into the oppression stage. That's when somebody is being targeted, and they're really being worn down by this through frightening things, through just repetition. Now, some signs of it are things coming in threes, numerical, things tend to come in threes. Something will begin on the phase of a new moon and will conclude on a full moon. These are things you have to look for in retrospect. The knocking is in threes, the things going backwards, rotating counterclockwise. And notice I did say the word sinister before, and that has an actual connotation, meaning from the left. Things will tend to strike from the left, and that's one sign of the demonic. But then again, you have to, at the end, kind of put these things into perspective and look on it in retrospect. If you see all these things happening and you recognize it for what it is, you'll hear voices where there can be no voices. Sometimes you'll hear birds singing where there is no branch out there, and just bizarre things that are trying to let you know that something's there. Mm-hmm. Now, it's a cosmic law that a true evil spirit, or demon if you want to call it that, will have to announce its presence and will have to announce what it is. It doesn't necessarily have to do it to somebody who will recognize it, but it has to announce what it is. And that's the telltale signs. Now, of course, the oppression stage can go on for weeks, months, sometimes in rare cases, even years. The oppression stage can go on, and that's basically to drive families crazy, to drive an individual crazy, to get them to stop resisting. And, of course, the ultimate, if it goes unchecked, and again, this is very, very rare, but if it goes unchecked, it can lead to somebody having a complete collapse or mental breakdown. And in rare cases actually possession, because your will is no longer your own and you stop resisting. So that's basically it in a nutshell.
Which can be a scary thing, but is it as prominent, or what's the word I'm looking for? Does it occur as often as it is projected currently within mainstream media?
Well, I'll put it this way. It's always happening. It's always going on somewhere in the world. But then again, lightning is striking always somewhere in the world. There are shark attacks always somewhere in the world. And true possession is rarer than either of these. Yes, it's always going on. It does happen. But the chances of somebody actually going under full oppression or possession are extremely, extremely rare. These things like to remain hidden. They do not like to expose what they are. Only when it's at an intense stage will they actually go into what I call the bragging stage, where they like to brag about what they are. So, yes, it is happening, but it's not really that common at all.
As a paranormal investigator, because, we are an open network of, paranormal interest here, if, just a random paranormal investigator does an investigation, but if there's not any of the signs that you just mentioned, could it essentially go undetected?
It can go undetected. It can go undetected for some time. The progression can be very, very slow in a case like this. But it's looking for loopholes. These things have intelligence. They have the wisdom of the ages. They can bide their time. They can get to know a person very, very well. They can take on the features of the dead. They can imitate the dead. They're masters at masquerading, at disguising. So sometimes they can bide their time until somebody opens up a door they're looking for, such as an access way, by doing some sort of conjuring ritual, inviting them in. There are various ways they can get in. That's through the law of invitation, the law of attraction. Somebody moves in and tends to just attract them, and a variety of ways. But oftentimes, if it's a real siege, a diabolical siege, somebody somewhere along the line usually has to give them permission to do so. It can even be accidental, but they do have to be granted permission.
Now, do you have to believe in any particular religion or believe in the religious aspects of a certain religion to be able to be threatened or impacted by a demonic nature?
No, you do not. Sometimes, if you do happen to have a certain religious belief, it will prey upon that or attack you in that certain way or oppress you in that certain way. But a belief is actually not necessary for it to start attacking and oppressing.
So are there any types of character commonalities between those individuals who are affected with a demonic occurrence? Is there anything similar that you've seen?
Sometimes there are. I mean, it attacks all sorts of people, but sometimes there are similarities. Sometimes it's somebody who's very, very lonely, maybe has been suffering from prolonged oppression or depression, has had their defenses down, is looking for something, some kind of thrill, some kind of avenue of escape, and will sometimes turn to the occult as this avenue of escape. Will sometimes join a cult, or will begin playing with a Ouija board, and they're psychologically or emotionally vulnerable. They'll find something. They'll begin playing with a Ouija board, and they'll find a friend on the Ouija board that seems very friendly, is complimenting them, is telling them what they want to know. And I think most of the time when someone's using a Ouija board, It's really your subconscious is playing with you. You're answering your own questions, in other words. You've got your fingertips, you've got maybe two people playing, or it can be one individual, but your subconscious is moving the planchette and you're answering your own questions subconsciously. However, sometimes if a spirit happens to be present and it's the wrong type of spirit, it can use that to manipulate very, very subtly, to infiltrate, to tell you what you want to hear. Tell you, compliment you, flatter you, but then sometimes, and this is rare, but sometimes it does happen. I know my friend Ryan Buell has experienced this with a client. Remember Ryan Buell from Paranormal Faith? He once dealt with a client who became so dependent on the Ouija board, she actually became addicted to it. She became psychologically addicted to it, where she had to spend so many hours a day. This was taking over her whole life, just this communication. She had her friend and she had to have it. People can become very, very dependent on this, and it becomes a tool that they use. But all it takes, that's the thing. There are deceptive people, so why not deceptive spirits as well? You don't trust everybody you meet. You don't just give out your password to just anybody. So there are deceptive spirits as well.
And I could see that and completely agree with that. Now, do you believe that there is a link between generations within a family and a demonic haunt?
This can happen. Doesn't happen all the time, but yeah, sometimes things are generational. And we see this with certain cultures, especially. Certain cultures, they're into a particular aspect of a certain religious following, and a generation will be promised, like the next generation will be promised that they're going to take over and their spirit familiars are inherited by another generation. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that when these young people are coming of age, they are involved in their parents' or their grandparents' religion, but the familiar spirits will sometimes suddenly make their presence known, and suddenly you've got a problem. Yes, and there can be generational promises and generational curses as well.
Okay, now when you say generational curses, how does that come into play? Like how do you even get yourself into one of those?
It's usually by accident. Somewhere along the line, somebody has cursed the generations of a family, and it will come back to revisit the family in the next generation. Now, I know this doesn't sound fair, but these spirits don't play fair. However, I do believe that these curses can be removed as well. They were placed and they can be removed. And, for example, there was when I was, my wife Sandra and Carl and I were members of the the Atlantic Paranormal Society, TAPS, of course, which you see on the TV show Ghost Hunters. But this was before the TV show. We were involved in a case in Brooklyn, New York. This is back 10 years ago, actually, back in 2003. And we came to investigate a house that was having some and this was an inhuman spirit, a demonic haunt, we believe. And they were having some pretty bizarre phenomena. And one of the family members was afraid for her young daughter because her young daughter was starting to become of age and starting to see these things as well. Well, we traced the family history back. We found out that a past generation was involved in some not very nice things, and it suddenly seemed to be revisiting this generation as well. And suddenly the haunting was going awry, going out of control. And it was an old house. It was an old brownstone house in Brooklyn, New York. But we found out that the basement of the house was a speakeasy back in the days of Prohibition. And it was used for prostitution and prohibition. This family living there had nothing to do with that, but past generations. One of the family members, the grandfather, had organized crime ties, and it's very sad that this family had to go through it. But when these things happen, I do believe there's an avenue of escape too. that's where we came in. They called upon TAPS, the Atlantic Paranormal Society. We came down there and we found out that this family was really experiencing this. One thing we did, of course, we were always recording, and my brother had borrowed my tape recorder. He was recording in the kitchen, and when we played the tape back, we suddenly got an EVP. Of course, that's electronic voice phenomena, where you don't necessarily hear it audibly till you play a recording back. And this recording said Beatrice. The voice said Beatrice very clearly. And nobody in the family, when we reviewed our evidence, we asked, by the way, who is Beatrice? Nobody in the family knew who Beatrice was. So one of the family members asked her mother, called her mother in Texas, and her mother practically passed out over the phone. So, my God, how do you know about Beatrice? Well, it turned out that Beatrice, the grandfather had a mistress. The grandfather that was involved in organized crime had a mistress, and she inconveniently became pregnant. Shortly after, she disappeared. The last time she was seen was in that house, and her name happened to be Beatrice. Now, the family had a well downstairs that was cemented over. There was a rumor, of course, you know, they just thought it was an urban legend, a rumor that somebody was buried down there, but then they started thinking, you know, now we know about Beatrice. In fact, they gave us a family journal, and we looked through it and found out that this guy was into some pretty bad stuff. And so, I mean, was this identifying Beatrice, the missing mistress? They'd never heard the name Beatrice in connotation with their family before. In fact, I have that EVP right here if you'd like to hear it.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, this is the EVP, and it's saying Beatrice, and we, at the time, we had no idea who this was.
Okay, and I'm turning up my speaker.
Did you hear that name, Beatrice?
Yeah, it was like right there at the end, right? It was like a whisper?
Right there at the end.
Yeah.
Beatrice, yes. And so that was a past generation, the, you know, sins of the forefathers visiting this family. And it turned out to be, you know, quite a heavy case. We did get several other EVPs from there, some threatening, and, you know, it was very, very dangerous situation, too, because at one time, of course, Brian Hanwell was with us, and if you remember Brian from Ghost Hunters, I don't know if you ever watched the show.
Briefly.
Yeah. Well, Brian, of course, he was a prominent member on the first few seasons, but of course, we went way back before the TV show, and he tends to be a little, you know, hot-headed and excitable. He was our excitable boy, we called him. After the Warren Zevon song, that was his nickname. So, you know, but one time he just got tired of this family being bullied with a young daughter, so he ran upstairs, against my advice. He ran upstairs and started challenging the spirit. And I said, Brian, that's not a good idea. But he went up and said, come on, take me on. Here I am, a 6-foot-tall, walking, talking monkey. Take me on. And next thing you know, he gets slammed against the wall, and oh, it's good, you know. And so he got knocked around quite a bit. But, you know, eventually, even though we never did wind up opening up, we wanted to actually use some equipment and open up the basement well, but the family didn't want that done, so of course we respected their wishes. So there may have been human remains down there, there may not have, but whatever happened, I wound up doing a blessing assisted by Sandra and my brother Carl and Brian. We went through the whole house, top to bottom, all 3 floors, and did a thorough blessing of the house, and that seemed to tone it down quite a bit. But I mean, there were even spirits appearing there visually, so that was a pretty heavy situation. Most situations will not be like that to that level, but this just happened to be an example of things had gone awry, they'd gone unchecked, and when the young daughter became of age, it just started things up again.
Well, Well, we are going to take a really quick break to wet our whistles and to refresh, and then we'll be back with more talks of the demonology and to mention an exorcism and what happens when they go wrong. And we will be back, and you guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And we're back, and I think Keith probably thinks I'm possessed because my 10-second countdown turned into like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 real quick. It moved faster than I thought in my brain. It's one of them days. But okay, I want to talk about near paranormal. What kind of services do you offer with your group?
We offer anything from just chatting with somebody on the phone, which we frequently do, because many of the people who contact us are from out of state. Sometimes quite frequently we do out of town consultations, out of state consultations. A lot of times we are invited onto locations to consult with clients, and we do a lot of research, historic background research. We also, if it's required and requested, there's frequent times where we go into people's home and we will conduct a thorough blessing. We'll sit down. If they're having a very negative situation, we'll try to calm them down. We'll get their story. We'll speak with them, tell them, what they should expect, what they should not expect. In other words, if they feel they have a spirit presence, we do not guarantee, obviously, that we're going to package it and take it out with us. I mean, this isn't Ghostbusters. We're not going to take a little canister and take it away. But we do it very thorough blessing, which is very calming. We use prayers and blessed water. We are removing, dispelling negative energy and entities, but we're not just dispelling it, we're replacing it with positive. We do it in a very, very positive manner. We're inviting the presence of the Holy Spirit. We're praying that angels, because if you just cast something out, that leaves a void, that leaves a vacuum. We pray that an angelic presence will come into a room and fill that void, especially if it's a room with children, where children have been sleeping. We use specific scripture from the Bible and prayers for that. And, I will kind of paint a verbal image. I will say an angel, a powerful angel will guard this child, these children. We ask that an angel, a warrior angel of God, will come in and bring peace to this place. So we do it very, very in a comforting manner. And Sandra and I work very well together. I'm very blessed that my wife actually is not just my partner in life, but my partner in the work as well, as we call it, capital W. Going out and doing this, and because it can be very, very tiring, very taxing, very frightening at times too. So I'm very blessed to have her, and she never falters. She's very fearless and very, very faithful. So, she's my soulmate. Mm-hmm. I have a wonderful, wonderful team. I can't say enough good about them, the NEAR team. And I invite anybody to go to our website, nearparanormal.com, and go to our members page and meet our team members. I mean, they're out all the time. Even when we're not with them, they're there out all the time, because there's always something going on around in the area. We have anything from mysterious rumblings going around. I live in Warwick, Rhode Island. Of course, we call that, Sandra calls that Ghost Hunter Central, because we're 10 minutes away from the TAPS office. So there's always something going on. But I mean, we have our, strange rumblings that there's no explanation for, and strange, we've had one of our members has had, I don't know how many UFO sightings he's had, and I haven't had any, but I used to belong to a UFO group, and I still haven't had any, but I mean, they're out in the field, they're out in the middle of the night, checking these things out. I like to think they're keeping the neighborhood safe for us so we can sleep well at night. So, wonderful, wonderful team members. They also are very helpful in our show. We have our own TV show, which is Ghosts Are Near. It's a local public access show. It's a public talk show where we interview people who have had brushes with the paranormal and different investigators, authors. Show's going very well. We're approaching our 100th episode. So
wow.
Yes, we cover anything from topics like demonology to we have experts on abductees, people who've dealt with that, all sorts of topics, conventions we cover. So you can see that on our website at nearparanormal.com, our archives, or you can go to YouTube. It's on Ghosts Are Near YouTube as well. So we're out there.
And nearparanormal.com has been on your screen, the viewer screen, all night. It's www.nearparanormal.com, as well as Keith's Facebook, where you can get in touch with him as well. I know I haven't mentioned that, but it's been there. Promise, Keith. So when you're going in to confront a demonic presence, and it's one that you've noticed there that you've confirmed, is there anything you have to do mentally, emotionally to prepare for that?
Well, yes, we do. We give ourselves a mindset that usually when we go into a situation like this, I know the TV shows make it look very, very thrilling and exciting. You're going to go in there and heads are going to be spinning and things are going to be flying off the walls. But I mean, usually that doesn't happen. Usually it's you see some very frightened, terrified people that want some reassurance, and that's mostly what we do. We try to help educate. However, if I've learned anything in this field, it's to expect the unexpected. So we always go in prepared. If anybody is sensitive, or psychic or sensitive, that's the chance that they will be targeted. They will be attacked because they're picking up on these spirits. So we always we pray for protection. We go in with a mindset that we're going with an altruistic purpose. We're not going in there to try to overly provoke for the sake of curiosity. I mean, we will recite scripture such as the book of Ephesians in the New Testament. Ephesians chapter 6 speaks about the armor of God, putting on the armor of God, and it's worded very poetically. The breastplate of righteousness, the helmet of salvation, and so on and so on. And this creates a very beautiful mental image. But it also, I believe that spirits do know that you have prayed this, and they will see that you are surrounded by this protective armor. Whereas the normal human will not be able to sense this, the spirits will know that you have prayed this, and usually they will back away from you. Now, it's what the words represent. It's the faith behind this. You have to go in with faith and believing. So, and you're there to help people and do something good, hopefully.
Let's kind of change gears into exorcisms and possessions for a moment. How common is a possession? Like, what would be your percentage that you'd say, even 1 every 5 or 10 years? I mean, like, is there any kind of numeric average you could put with it?
Well, I do seem to deal with them, I would say, myself, once every 4 to 5 months, I'm dealing with possession. Sometimes it's more common than this, but of course I have people contacting me from all over the country. But it's very, very rare that an investigator will meet up with a situation like this. However, there is always the possibility. You're dealing with the supernatural, and you may run into the preternatural as well. So it's not that common at all, but I would say there's, if you're out investigating, say you do 100 investigations, there's always that maybe 1 to 2% chance that you will run into somebody who is genuinely possessed. And there's always the possibility.
Now, with the possession, if you come across someone that is possessed, then we move into exorcisms. Isn't that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So, can an exorcism go wrong? And if it goes wrong, what happens?
It can go wrong. I've seen it go wrong personally. It's nothing to play around with. It's can be very, very, very dangerous. It's physically and psychologically dangerous. For example, there was a possession case my brother and I were working on back in the early 1980s, and it was through family friends that were asked to participate. Now, I was told that this would be a Catholic exorcism, and that Catholic clergy would be there, and would my brother and I assist, and I had no problem with that. I was looking forward to assisting, and I entered the situation very prayerfully. However, it did not turn out to be strict Catholicism. It turned out to be another religion where it was mixing Roman Catholicism with other beliefs as well. And it was not a priest, it was a priestess. And this involved a 14-year-old boy who was going under possession, and the actual exorcist was his aunt. And it was nothing that I was prepared for. I thought it would be very, very, reading from the Ritual Romanum, and it would be very, very controlled. Well, it turned out to be complete chaos. I mean, this boy, once he went under possession, the first thing that happened, of course, you get a warning sometimes. You get a warning. I call it the aura. You get a 3-second warning where the atmosphere will change, and you know that something's crossed over. My brother was sitting in a family easy chair. It wasn't a light chair. Suddenly, you felt that change in the atmosphere. There was a rumbling across the floor. My brother in his chair began moving back. The whole chair and him moving back, and he's looking around, what's going on? And, so what is this? And then the boy went under possession. His face changed dramatically, and he slid off the chair, began screaming, unearthly screams. He began writhing like a cobra, and it was pretty exhausting. We had to hold it. I had no idea I thought maybe we'd be assisting with restraining, but I didn't know we'd be on the floor wrestling with him and holding him down. It took 3 adults to practically sit on him to hold him down. He was a kind of a thin, frail 14-year-old boy, but he had abnormal strength and abnormal motor control, and you felt when something like this is going on, the atmosphere has changed. You just feel completely drained. The energy is like draining right out of you, and so it wound up that not only did he get possessed, but the exorcist herself went under demonic possession during it.
Oh my goodness!
So that's something we were not expecting, and there is a danger of that sometimes. And a familiar spirit came out and took hold of her, and while the spirit was possessing her, she became a fortune teller through her familiar spirit, and began telling everybody, gather around and I will tell you a fortune. Of course, everybody gathered around. There's a spirit, taking over somebody, and they're going to tell fortunes, and that's not why we came here for. I mean, we came here to help the poor nephew there, but see that's something that can happen. Things can go awry. You can get distracted. Spirits work in unison with each other. So that kind of broke up the exorcism for a while.
Wow, that's intense. How often are you confronted with a hoax or someone just, either voluntarily making up things or they think things are happening and they really have mental issues, I guess is a better way to cover that too.
Well, once in a while, unfortunately, that will happen too. And sometimes it's not, sometimes there can be, we have found signs of actual paranormal activity, usually in the form of electronic voice phenomena, but the person, the family or the client involved will be staging some things too. And you have to understand, they're in such a state, they'll sometimes, and I know John Zaffis, my colleague John Zaffis has said the same thing, sometimes they'll do just about anything to keep you there. They'll, even if it means going into the bathroom, scratching yourself and coming out. And of course, if you go into the bathroom and scratch your stomach or your chest, you pull up your shirt, you're going to see welts rising. I've seen clients do that before. And if you scratch yourself, welts are going to rise before your eyes. So, but you have to watch it. Did somebody just go into the bathroom, then come out and say they just got scratched? It's another thing if somebody's right in the room with you, all of a sudden they get scratched and they pull up the shirt and you see it. But you have to keep an eye on people. But yeah, we have had people that they'll do anything to keep you there, and including staging some things and everything. But you have to understand, a lot of the times these people do really need help too, and they want to get their story out and stuff like that. And we think everybody needs a chance to at least tell their story and some intervention.
Yeah. How do you, if you have a client that goes in and they scratch themselves or they're doing this kind of thing, I mean, how is there a political and humble way to handle that? I mean, I'm just curious. I mean, how do you even handle that?
It's very difficult because you, well, for example, I was just working with a group, that's out west, and they had a good way of doing it. They said, I'm sorry, but now I'm going to have to ask, I want to be a good investigator, so I'm going to have to ask the tough questions, and that kind of eases it a little bit. It's just, you don't want to come out and say, I don't believe you, because a lot of what they might be saying could be legit. You just, you submit their findings. You can say at the end, we really did not, for example, we were on a case recently that the woman is seeing spirits left and right, and I believe she's sincere. I believe she really does see them, but we just did not happen to catch any evidence. And so that's what we reported. We said we personally did not capture any EVP. We did not capture any sightings on the video or photographs. So, but we are here if you need our help, and we can always refer other people and everything. And she might be somebody who might feel more comfortable with somebody who is like psychic or sensitive, who will come in and say, I'm feeling this here, I'm seeing this there. And whereas we do not claim I think everybody has some ability to begin with, but if you're working with somebody who's sensitive, who's a psychic, make sure they're very grounded, especially if you're going into an extreme case. But if they can point, they feel something's there, they're picking up on something, it doesn't hurt to shoot off a dozen pictures or so in that area. You might catch something there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree with that 110%. Now, what kind of things do you have coming up? Any kind of events that you have going on? We only have about 5 minutes left, so I want to give you some time to promo you.
Okay, well, I don't know, you may or may not know, the movie The Conjuring that recently came out earlier this year.
I do.
Yeah, and my brother Carl and I and our friend Donna were the 3 original investigators of that case.
Huh.
That's not the way it's portrayed in the movie, but yes,
No.
we were the ones who originally were in contact with the family. The family felt they had no place to turn. The Perrin family in Harrisville, of course, they don't live there now, but Harrisville, Rhode Island. And so they called us in, and we investigated that house, and we experienced quite a bit of phenomena. And we were the ones, of course, we were friends with Ed and Lorraine Warren. We were the ones who called Ed and Lorraine Warren in on that case. So, but yeah, I'm doing quite a bit of promo on that. There's a lot of interviews I'm doing about the actual true case of The Conjuring, and with my dear friend Andrea Perrin, who of course is the excuse me, the eldest daughter of the family. So I'm doing quite a bit of promo work with that, and lecturing with Andrea and telling the true story of what actually happened, that because it is based on actual truth. And Sandra and I just finished doing Rhode Island Comic Con, so if anybody wants to see where we're appearing, you can go to our website, nearparanormal.com. It has our appearances. And of course, I have my 2 books. I have Paranormal Realities here.
Yay, I love it when you show your own book on the screen. Look, take a picture.
Yeah, there you go. That's Paranormal Realities and Paranormal Realities 2.
Woohoo!
Designed by a good friend, Raymond Dualaby, Lisa Dualaby's husband, and has quite a good, few pictures in here, illustrations and everything. And Paranormal Realities 3 is about to come out in another few weeks, hopefully, another month. The third in the trilogy, Paranormal Realities 2, and Paranormal Realities 3.
And what are those? You want to take a moment just to talk about what the books are about as a trilogy themselves?
Right. They're exactly what they say. Paranormal Realities is, of course, about true stories that I've experienced, and it tells about how I first got into this field and what spurred me on and some of my original adventures. And it's, basically my story and people that I've been close to, groups I've worked with, such as TAPS, the Atlantic Paranormal Society, and Paranormal State. Sandra and I have made some appearances on that, what Carl and I have been up to. And Paranormal Realities 2 picks up where that rests off, and doesn't matter which book you start with, actually. It's both tell the true stories of various cases we've been on. For example, Paranormal Realities 2 talks about Slater Mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, where my brother and I are both tour guides, and we do the ghost tours too. My brother's organized ghost tours, and that's a haunted site. It's the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, American Industrial Revolution, so that's quite a history. So Paranormal Realities 3 takes up, and those who are fans of TAPS, of ghost hunters, well, you can read some stories that never appeared on TV, such as the Lost Possession episode, an episode about possession that was never aired, and some things that took place, like the Brooklyn case I talked about, even before the TV show began. So that's what the books are about.
And that's awesome. And where can you get? Are they like on Amazon, Keith, the Barnes and Noble?
Yeah. You can get them, sure, on Amazon.com. Also, you can go to our site at Near Paranormal. If you order a book from our site, then you get the autographed copy. So I'll give it to you with your name or whatever you want me to say.
And that website is up on your screen one more time for the night. It's been on throughout the entire night. It's www.nearparanormal.com. That's right, it's above your head. You can't see it, but it is above your head, Keith.
Things are above my head, I tell you.
It is. Sometimes it's below your head, but right now it is above your head.
Okay.
All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in so much to Paranormal Minds. I want to thank Keith Johnson so much for coming on this evening. You've been a wonderful guest. I greatly appreciate it. And I do want to mention that next week I will have on Sean Stone, who's an actor, producer, and director, and did the movie Greystone Park, and we're going to be talking to him about that, and I have a few questions. Alrighty, Mr. Johnson, thank you so much for being on once again. I greatly do appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And everyone, please be sure to tune in. Oh, I wanted to put up Mr. Johnson's website one more time. There we go. www.nearparanormal.com. Everyone, please be sure to tune in next week. Paranormal Minds right here, same time, same place. Have a wonderful week. Get ready for Thanksgiving and lots of great food, and we'll see you next week. Bye. Hi everyone, and you are tuned in to another wonderful episode of Paranormal Minds. I'm your host Shannon Ray, and I'd like to thank you for joining me this evening. Tonight we have a super special guest, Keith Johnson. Before I bring Keith in, I do want to tell you a little bit about him. Keith Johnson is a paranormal investigator, and he is regularly called upon to assist individuals with dealing with alleged paranormal phenomenon and potential inhuman infestation in their homes. Keith's interest in the paranormal started when he was a teenager, having had activity in his own home. Keith has been featured as a consulting demonologist on Sci-Fi Channel's Ghost Hunters, as well as the A&E series Paranormal State. And without further ado, I would like to go ahead and bring in Mr. Keith Johnson and welcome him to the show. Hi, Mr. Johnson.
Hello, Shannon. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderfully, and I'm super glad you're here with me tonight.
Well, super glad to be here, that's for sure.
All right, so I want to start talking a little bit about you, just you as the person, I guess. When you said that you kind of got interested in the paranormal when you were a teenager, can you kind of look back and recall what began that journey?
I actually had some experiences in my own house growing up. Of course, my brother Carl and I are identical twins, and when we were actually small children, we began to experience things. The first thing I remember was when I was 5 years of age, and my mother was drinking a glass of water after supper, and suddenly the water just vaporized. It just bubbled up and was gone, so she didn't get to drink it. And we had no explanation for that, so we termed that our thirsty ghost. And that's how it began. It's just little bizarre things that were not terribly frightening, but enough to let us know that there was something there. And of course I was pretty scared when I heard voices and footsteps outside the window, and then they started happening again when I was about 15 years of age, and then I knew I wasn't imagining it, I wasn't dreaming it. And of course my brother and my sister began playing with a Ouija board to try to contact the spirit, and that seemed to open up things to let it in even further, so it wasn't quite as nice and playful as it had been. And just experiencing some bizarre things, like there was what appeared to be a woman's glove, maybe a driving glove, very old-fashioned, appeared in the hallway. We had no idea what into the experimentation of the paranormal. You know, when you're younger, you don't really realize the dangers and inherent dangers involved, and you dare to do anything. But as the years went by, we devoted ourselves more and more to research and to helping people. We joined an organization called Monitor East years later, which was basically a UFO group. They studied UFOs, but of course when Carl and I joined, we kind of changed that. They branched off into all aspects of the paranormal, and so basically, yeah, we've done a lot of things together and done a lot of studying and research together. And you have to remember, though, this goes back to the early 70s. This is before it was popular. This is before it was gaining a lot of national media attention like it is today. So we were kind of outcast in this field. It wasn't something you could sit around at dinner and just talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And even now, when I was in high school, and I was so interested, and I shadowed different paranormal groups, it wasn't something cool then that you talked about with your friends. It was something I kind of hid in the closet, and then it wasn't something I discussed that I did because it was so taboo to do. And sometimes
began studying it, and of course that lecture really spurred things off, and we met Ed and Lorraine Warren after the lecture, became lifelong friends with them. It was after this lecture that there were also members of a group at Rhode Island College called PIRO, Parapsychological Investigation and Research Organization. And since Carl and I were into the paranormal, we've been studying it, they decided to invite us to a couple of their meetings to talk and share our experiences. And lo and behold, we were soon invited to join their organization. And that's the first formal organization that my brother and I joined, and we were 17 years old at the time, and I guess that's how it started, basically.
With you and your identical twin brother, would it be correct to say that your journey with the paranormal has been paired together?
A lot of it has. At least we started off together. He he took somewhat of a different route. He experimented more in the darker aspects of it, whereas I did a lot of things I shouldn't have way back when, as far as experimentation goes, but he was kind of more hot and heavy. Where it came from, looked around, it was gone, kind of like teleportation, and my sister was in the dining room, suddenly she got shoved from behind by an unseen hand, and the Ouija board started spelling out very threatening things. It wasn't as nice anymore, and things like that. So we realized that something was really there, and I'd always had an interest in anything bizarre or spooky and everything, but of course we were brought up in a Christian household, and I really began concentrating on this, that I wanted to be able to help people, to do some good with it, because I understood that some people were terrorized by this and some people were very frightened, and I had no idea what outlet to use. So I did pray about it, and lo and behold, I was invited to a lecture. My brother and I attended a lecture at Rhode Island College where famed paranormal researchers Ed and Lorraine Warren were speaking, and we found that fascinating and thought maybe we're not so crazy after all. These people go all over the world and they investigate things that go bump in the night, and the more sinister things like demonology, and I became fascinated with angelology and demonology.